Alright, hey everybody, it's Jason or AJ or whatever the hell my name is these days. Welcome back, and I have a special guest with me today.
Hello
This is
everyone.
my brother Brian, and he is in fact the first person I guess I've ever had on the show or interviewed or however you want to call it. And the reason I have him on is because the games that you see here and a lot of my interest in this stuff was really fostered by this guy. So he was doing it first, and then I came along and followed suit.
So yeah, as the big brother, I was the one who found wargaming. So growing up, our mother always had us playing games, Trivial Pursuit, chess. We were in a store called Toy Chest one time, which is precursor to the Toys R Us of today. And I was walking through the aisles looking for toys, and I got into the game section and I found War at Sea. I found this whole section of games I didn't even know existed from a company called Avalon Hill. And I convinced my mother, so this is the game. It's in my brother Jason's collection, but this is the game, bought at Toy Chest. The first war game I ever purchased from the Avalon Hill Game Company.
Now, I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
War at Sea.
Now they had other games on the shelf.
Right. I picked this one because I always had a soft spot for naval. I don't know why. I was fascinated by the Bismarck. I was fascinated by the German Navy in World War II because they were always such underdogs, and I know they ended up doing U-boats. But they made some of the best battleships. The Tirpitz?
Well, yeah,
Tirpitz, and then the Bismarck, of course, which is legendary. But
as a young kid, or even, look at, how do you deny a cover like that and not,
right?
You know,
Yeah,
that's almost not fair to put on a shelf and sell to a kid.
And I convinced our mother to let me get this game, and from that point on, and there was the Avalon Hill catalog was inside, and from that point on, any spare money I had from that point, I bought a war game, and it was incredible.
You know we're not 6 feet apart, right?
Yes. Okay. We are not social distancing, but we're...
Don't do likewise at home.
But we're family.
I guess we are. You've always been like a brother to me. I've always said that. But let's back up for a second. You didn't, but I think maybe, didn't you start with like Dungeons and Dragons though, or did that come later? You did do a little stint though, right?
Right. Timeline-wise, Dungeons and Dragons was about the same time.
Yeah. It didn't stick though, huh?
So, my friend group at my dad's house, we did a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, but then the Dungeons and Dragons kind of faded, and we actually did war games. So, the Third Reich game from Avalon Hill, oh God, yes, which is also one of their classics, and this was my copy that's now in my brother's collection. Actually, 4 of us, I taught 3 of my friends this, and the Russian campaign, and we would actually 4-man these games. 2 would take the Axis and 2 would take the Allies. So in the case of Third Reich, you would actually be like, 1 would be the Americans and 1 would be the British, and then 1 would be the Russians and 1 would be the attack. We just kind of divvied it up that way.
So was this like a whole weekend thing you would do for the whole weekend?
So we had it on my pool table in my basement, and we'd have long gaming sessions, especially in the summer when we weren't in school, and it's so hot, and none of us had pools, so we would go down in my basement and we would play these games. But I did the majority of my gaming, as I think most war gamers do, solo. Yeah. But there was certain games at me and my friends. And then, of course, I lived with my dad and used to live with our mom. And when I would come out for the weekends to visit Mom and Jason,
infamous weekends,
games came with me. And Jason would watch and play and look through the stuff.
I think I was still too young to be at that level, but I would appreciate and live vicariously through what he did. Every weekend, a new game showed up.
Right, I always came out with a new game.
It's like, wow, man.
And even if I wasn't going to play it, it was just to read it and digest the rules and punch out all the counters and separate them all and put them either in a tray or in a Ziploc baggie. God, it was a great era. I mean, it was pre-PC. It was pre-video games, except for maybe the Atari 2600 and the Commodore 64, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, I'm gonna grill you on some computer stuff
Right.
in a bit. The earliest thing, but to go back even further, the earliest thing I think I remember, as far as exposure to anything war game, at least with this guy, is there was a play set in a huge box, and it was the Navarone. Remember the movie? Was it Guns of Navarone?
Guns and Navarone. So yes,
They came out with a huge play set.
You
of this
got
with
the mountain.
Yeah, and you had this set up, and I'm like,
and it had the guns.
why don't I have this thing? Why does he get that thing? And I don't even know why. I was playing with Legos or blocks or something. I'm like,
Yes, our mother always made sure we had Legos, but yes, I had the Guns and Navarone
that thing was
set.
awesome. Yeah.
Yes, and it had. If anybody remembers the movie, there's the infamous scene towards the end where they put the sticky bomb on the elevator shaft, and to blow up the guns,
We could blow the mountain up.
they were waiting for the Germans to go up the elevator, and the Guns and Navarone plastic playset, this giant mountain with the two big guns up there, it had the elevator shaft. It was
That's
it
cool.
was so
Yeah, it was
amazing.
awesome.
It was
awesome.
so amazing. But yeah, so even backtracking a little, even before the war games, and it's still evident in stuff that Jason posts now, had my army men. And if you remember back in the day, there was the comic books, and at the last page of the comic books, there was these advertisements, and you could always, if you sent in $2.49, they'd send you 100 army men or Civil War guys. I had my little blue and my gray Civil War guys.
The ads for these things were outlandish. It just looked like a complete crazy war going on.
I wish I had some of those comic
And it was
books.
always from Battle Creek.
Yes.
What the hell's Battle? Is that a real place, Battle Creek?
That's a great question. Great question.
But it's always from the same place, Battle Creek. I remember that.
But yes, so there was a natural transition from Army men into Army board games and war games.
I
So
think I was still playing with G.I. Joes at about 12 and 13 when you're cracking into ASL and stuff like that.
So-
What else? We've got the General Magazine. Let me ask you this. So you had a subscription.
Yep.
And for those of you that don't remember or maybe don't know, the General Magazine was Avalon Hill's in-house magazine and
War Game magazine,
all
yes.
related to their games and stuff. What made you decide I need to subscribe to this? Now, did you get information on how to play games out of it, or was it the ads for new games coming out, or?
I remember, because you couldn't just, let's go to the Avalon Hill website and learn about them.
Yeah.
So it had to be an advertisement in one of the games I bought from them. And it said that you could get bonus scenarios and designer notes or strategy articles, and plus they would advertise their own up and coming or newly released games. So I immediately subscribed. Now, I was too young. I never got to go to any of the war game conventions back in the day. I mean, we're talking late 70s and into the 80s. So I know that they would do subscription things at the conventions, and that's how they would build up their general. You have all my general magazines here too, somewhere. I mean, they were amazing. They were in color because Avalon Hill was owned by a printing company called Monarch Avalon, if I remember right. So they printed all their own stuff, and it was always at the time just such great quality. But it was mainly for designer notes, strategy articles, bonus scenarios. Errata was in there because that was big back then. You'd buy a game and you could catch some stuff, and they didn't do like GMT does now, I think, with a lot of their second and third printings.
Fixing a lot of stuff.
Where they would fix a lot of stuff. It would stay as it was. But yeah, the General Magazine was amazing.
Yeah. I should also add that you may notice he has a St. Louis Blues shirt on. And I, of course, likewise, am a diehard Blues fan. But it's this guy's fault. I didn't want anything to do with hockey or the damn Blues growing up. And how many nights did we sit and
Saturday night hockey on Channel 11.
You, longer than me, have had to live through a life of pain until obviously most recently.
Right. Blues being the current Stanley Cup champions, but they made us wait.
My God, I mean,
52 years before they became champs.
Every year you knew how it was going to end. You just
Heartache.
That heartbreak every year.
Which is why, being from St. Louis, I never hated the Cubs, because Cub fans, I sympathized and empathized with them. They had heartache after heartache, even Boston Red Sox fans, but St. Louis Blues fans, oh my God. And I met my poor son and my poor brother here.
Well, your dad's the one that started it with you,
My
right?
dad was an original season ticket holder in
Bring you in,
1967, so
set you on his knees.
right, you could bring your kid in as long as they could sit on your lap for free. So I went to Blues games with him from even before I knew I was going to Blues games. I was going to Blues games.
Was it like 4 generations now of Blues fans? 1, 2, or 3?
Three generations, yes.
Kyle has kids.
Yep. But they finally gave us a championship, so.
It was worth the wait. So sorry to digress, but that's
Right.
another influence, and yeah.
So I'm down here in southern U.S. visiting my
Representing.
brother, and I've made sure that the city down here has seen the blue note
Yeah.
proudly on my chest for 2 solid days.
Yeah, he's doing a good job with that.
Yep.
Back to the games, though.
Yes.
Moving along. At what point did you get into? Because you started with squad leader, right?
Yes.
And then it went to ASL. Again, you saw the box. You're like, hey, I'm intrigued.
Right.
And then just got sucked in a
And
hole.
actually, and you and I have talked about it, and you talked about it on a recent YouTube video you were invited to. The squad leader, the cover of squad leader.
All the stuff's over
Yeah,
there.
he's got actually a whole separate squad leader section that's different from the collection here behind me.
Well, you all have seen the cover anyway.
Right. So, Jason leans towards the tactical. I actually lean towards the operational.
He does.
But Squad Leader was just a beautiful game, and I bought it, and it actually, if you followed the news of wargaming at the time, Squad Leader kind of took wargaming by storm, and I love that game. God, the guards, from the very first scenario, guards counterattack, I think, in the factories of Stalingrad. And then when they migrated and developed Advanced Squad Leader.
Well, they had I'm sorry to interrupt, but they did come out with the little gamettes afterwards,
Yeah.
like Crescendo of Doom, Cross
Yes.
of Iron.
Which I bought
And,
all of
right,
them.
and you learn that stuff, right?
Yes.
And then you see something called ASL. Were you pissed that you had to? There was this now a new different.
Right. No, because when I ordered it and when that manual arrived, that was incredible. I mean, the production
Yeah, there was
value.
nothing like it before.
And going back to the errata part, they did individual pages in a 3-ring binder manual, all top quality, and they promised us that they would send new pages to you to fix anything, and it was just an amazing thing. But actually, Advanced Squad Leader, so Jason's been able to digest it. Advanced Squad Leader, actually, I'm not afraid to admit it, actually got to a level that almost was too much for me. It was too complicated.
Well, I think there's
just-
aspects of it that are too much for me that I.
There's casual gaming, I get it, the beer and pretzels. Then there's what I would say is the equivalent of a hard level of game. And then there's
Neurotic.
there's
Crazy.
Advanced Squad Leader. And it was incredible. I couldn't digest it all. I mean,
Alright.
I used to take the manual with me to work. I was reading it every day at
Well,
lunchtime.
you almost have to, or how are you
Right.
going to learn? It's not like you can sit down on a Saturday afternoon
Right.
and learn Advanced Squad.
And what I found, I don't know if other people have done this, but what I found was I would go back to Squad Leader.
Yeah.
I didn't stay with Advanced Squad Leader, even though I bought like the first 3 or 4 giant.
Yeah, you even had the
Expansions.
deluxe ASL, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that, so Advanced Squad Leader was probably the last time I really invested a considerable amount of money into board gaming before I.
Saw some. How did that start? The
Before
computer
I-
thing?
yes,
You saw
so-
somebody that had a PC game going or something.
I started dating what became my future wife, and first couple times I'm over at her house, I'm like, what is this in this room over here? And it was a Commodore 64. Her father had a Commodore 64. Their kids, my future wife and her brother and sister, they didn't even use it. It was for, he was in computers with the Air Force. It was this Commodore 64. I'm like, what is this Commodore 64? I mean, I knew about computers. Everybody knew about computers. But I'm like, this is amazing. I'm like, what kind of programs do you have? I'm like, he didn't have any games. He did work stuff and business stuff, and he was typing in the basic language and he was entering programs in there, and I'm like, is there any games for this thing? And my future wife worked in the mall, and she's like, there's a store in the mall. And I knew about this store called Babbage's, which is named after Charles Babbage, the founder of the computer. And I'm like, okay, let's go in there, because I'd never really even paid any attention to it. When I went to the mall, I was going to the bookstore, and I was going to the record store. There wasn't even game stores where you could go buy board games at the time.
Right.
So I went in there, and the very first computer game I bought, I didn't even own a computer, but I bought, oh God, I just blanked out on it.
I haven't even heard this.
But it's from Microprose, and it was called
Was it a war game?
Something Commando. Yes. Well, no, it was, but you played as an individual soldier, and you had to go through these maps either by shooting or crawling or throwing grenades. You had to get from the bottom of the map up to the objective at the top of the map, and it was amazing. And I played the heck out of this thing from a company called Microprose, which, if anybody knows the computer game Civilization, which is one of the most popular, Sid Meier, that was his first company, Microprose, and they made
Civilization?
F-14 and F-18, and oh my God, they did Red Storm, the computer version of Tom Clancy's Red Storm Rising book. They did the computer version of that, and it was just incredible. And then I bought my own, and the very first game I ever bought for my own Commodore 64 was from SSI, called the War Game Construction Set. So going back to my war game roots, I went back into Babbage's, and I'm like, this thing is telling me that I can design my own war games. And it was I spent so much time with that thing. I would try and make scenarios from some of my favorite board games into the war game construction set, or just designing my own war game. I want to find out what a 5 versus 5 tank battle is like, and you could design a terrain. It was incredible for the time. I mean, it's just hard to fathom. So, but I transitioned away from board games, and I made the jump into computer games.
I'll add one other thing to the. I mean, it's all computers for him here on out. There's no hope for him anymore.
There's no hope. I'm completely warped into PC games and video games.
And it never really stuck with me, and I don't know why. But there was a short stint where we had that Amiga, and again, coming out over on weekends and bringing games and
so Commodore made the 64, then the 128, which didn't stick, but then they made the Commodore Amiga. Some of you may or may not know that. It was actually the first. The operating system they had was ahead of its time. You used a mouse, which was incredible, and you could actually drop, drag and click, drop. It had a trash can. It was the precursor to what Microsoft came out with Windows, and it was amazing. But continuing the Microsoft and SSI and SSG, there were some great companies just making some amazing war games. But I'd bring games out like
we did a hockey game on there.
And there was Wayne Gretzky,
Rocket Ranger.
Wayne Gretzky hockey, Rocket Ranger. Oh my God, yes. Silent Hunter was one of my favorites, where you hunted German U-boats in World War II in the Atlantic. God, it was so good. It was just so good.
And the rest is history. He plays PC games.
Right.
But you're sitting right here, you have tipped your toe back into the waters a couple of times. Yep. And every once in a while, I send you a game that you're like, wow, I got this great big game called Fire in the Lake. What do I do with it? I don't play board games.
On my birthday or Christmas, all of a sudden Jason will send me a big war game, and I think he just hopes that someday I'll go back into the hobby. But
did you open Fire in the Lake?
I have. I've never actually played it.
I don't blame you.
I don't know what happened. There's something that happens when you switch to computer and video games. And this is no joke, you literally lose the ability to digest these big, thick war game rule books. Your brain gets rewired for the instant gratification of booting up a game and either taking the mouse and keyboard or the controller, and just the visual stimulation. Then it pulls you in from there, and it'll pop up on the screen. Here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do. But I have still.
Couple,
there's some that stuck.
The Hunters, you liked
that? The Hunters, I actually did several missions in the Hunters?
D-Day at Omaha Beach, not so much. And
Yeah.
that wasn't necessarily the way the game played, but you didn't get past punching you got frustrated trying to punch the
Oh
damn
my God,
counters
yes.
off.
Which other people, which I learned on the internet, the counter sheets that they made for D-Day at Omaha Beach, you couldn't punch them out, and they would like rip, and they were stuck together. The cutting between each piece didn't go all the way through. It weren't perforated.
He's a poster boy of anal and OCD,
Oh
so
my God.
imagine him trying to...
I never got past punching out
I think you got so irritated you just said
Right.
it.
And then of course,
Hitler's Reich.
Hitler's Reich. I was so excited for this. See if you can grab that. This was like...
I only had this because he had it.
This is the first game in my roots and my brother's honor. This is the first one I did the P500 for.
Yeah.
I actually gave them money ahead of time. I'm like, this is a solitaire game of World War II in Europe. Once again, Jason leans a little towards the tactical. I love the hierarchy. I'm like, oh my God. Because there's always something, we all love the ability of, what if we can take Germany and actually get them to win World War II? I mean, it's the one of the ultimate war game scenarios. So I put in and I waited patiently for this thing to come out. And it came, and the production value of GMT games are just
it's
amazing.
great. Yeah.
And then
Nothing wrong with that.
I sat down to try and read the rule book,
Yeah.
and I called Jason and I said, bro, something's wrong. This rule book doesn't make any sense. I can't even figure out how I'm supposed to play this game. And then I think you...
I posted something on Hexes and Soldiers Facebook page about that. And then actually the designer, Mark, he chimed in and was trying to explain what might be going on with that. And then other sources have started saying, hey, there's actually something wrong. And then GMT finally admitted something fell through the cracks here with this. But they have since made amends. And
Right. So there's been videos, how to play videos came out. They actually created something you could print, download and print, how to play, better understand some of the systems.
Right.
All I did is I donated it to Jason so it could go into the collection properly.
But they did make amends.
Yes,
right? So-
yes, credit to them.
And then you have,
Mr. President
it's
is
been
my
on
current...
pre-order for 15 years.
I think,
something
yeah.
Like that, 17
So I'm
years.
53 years old. I think I first put the order in when I was 42.
Exactly.
And
Yeah. Mr. President, the game that will never be released because they want apparently 9,000 pre-orders before they'll release it.
I don't know how it's taking so long.
Like I said, I think they want this to be the perfect game.
Once again, so to let you know a little bit more about me, my favorite TV show of all time is The West Wing. I'm fascinated by the White House, The West Wing, and
I mean,
so I'm like, oh my God, they're making a game called Mr. President, a solitaire game where you get to be the President of the United States, and
Right,
it's from
right.
GMT, so I know the quality's going to be
Yeah.
top notch. It's designed as a solitaire game. It doesn't just have a bot or a little tacked on system to a two-player game.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is amazing, and this thing has been years, but it just, in recent updates, before the coronavirus, it finally made its way into the final art stage.
Well, yeah, which is what, like 6 to 9 months. But before that, it was going backwards. It seemed like.
Yes.
There would be like, okay,
There was
we're getting there.
actually
And then it
updates
would
from
say,
Gene. There was actually updates from Gene where it no longer was even mentioned or talked about.
Yeah, there was that too. Like,
like,
where did it go? Was it still even on pre-order?
Yes,
But
Mr. President. So I'm excited for that. So an actual board game.
maybe 2020 is the year for Mr. President.
I would think they would want to get it out by Christmas.
I think he wants it to be perfect,
Yeah.
which I don't know what.
And isn't it actually Gene's game? Isn't it him? I mean, is he the owner of
yeah,
GMT?
yeah, and it's his baby.
So it's actually his. So I expect
makes
this
sense
thing.
that he wants it to be like
Right.
the next best thing since the last best thing.
Right.
Couple other things, and we'll wrap it up. But has there been any games that you've played, and this goes all the way back to the beginning, board games, that stand out that were stinkers? And I'm not trying to call anybody out or put you on the spot, but
Right.
anything you're like, oh, this is going to be awesome, and you bought it, and you're like, oh my lord, what did I get myself into? This stinks.
I would say, now this is just my personal opinion because there
Right,
might be people who love the game. You and I were talking last night about
Oh, yeah.
Firepower, and I was a big fan of let me get his name out. It's in the rule book. I was looking at it last night. I was so excited because I was so big into the. But when S. Craig Taylor Jr. he was one of my favorite game designers, and he actually joined Avalon Hill. What is the copyright year on this game?
That would be
1984.
yeah.
So yeah, this is one in the height. I'm still doing.
We have 2 copies, by the way, for
Sometimes I would buy a second copy later because every once in a while you would get a second printing. So here, for example, here's a whole advertisement for the General magazine on the back of the Firepower. But anyway, the designer, S. Craig Taylor Jr., he joined Avalon Hill, and this was his first game, and I was so excited for this thing. Kind of like Squad Leader, it's man-to-man squad tactics from 1965 to the present. So here's something that's going to get us out of World War II, right? And once again, and people are just going to be, well, judging by what you say, you obviously struggle with manuals. I struggle with the manual of this thing. And
didn't you even write them with questions?
yes, and we were trying to find that. So back in the day,
you could mail in. Yeah.
Back in the day, Avalon Hill was really good, and I'm sure some of the other companies did it too. But if you had questions, you would have to write down what page in the rule book, what number the question was, and you would write your question out and leave space for an answer, and you could mail these things in.
The good old days.
Avalon Hill, and the game designer himself would answer your questions, handwritten notes, and mail. You had to send in a self-addressed stamped envelope, and they would mail them back to you, answering your, because there wasn't the internet. You couldn't email, or there wasn't forums. Well, I guess there was the CompuServe forums and stuff, but I didn't know at the time that those things existed in the text-based world right before America Online. Right.
World,
but they would answer your questions to clarify something in the rule book or give you a how to play answer and mail them back to you, and they were so cool. And several of these games have some of those in there. For some reason, I can't find my Firepower one.
You're right, I like tactical, but I have to say the man-to-man stuff, there's something about it I don't much care for. Like, is he kneeling down? Is he standing? Is he prone? I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah, see, Firepower took the squad down to the man.
Except for, and I will make an exception, Battle Him and Ambush. Man-to-man, but those games are unrivaled as far as narrative and storytelling.
So the Division Victory games that Avalon Hill owned, I believe, they put out a set of games. And they did a really good job of kind of separating themselves from Avalon Hill, even though they were part of the Avalon Hill family. But they put out some quality stuff. But Ambush, which was solitaire squad level World War II combat, was just, it was like a true tactical man-to-man, and its system was brilliant.
It felt like I was inside a movie. That's what it felt like to me when I played it.
I loved that game so much that I kept like a diary of the commander of the squad.
You're not the only one. Yeah.
And I would write down an after action report of what my squad went through in that scenario. It was just, oh God, I love that game. And then I was a big fan of their Fleet series, which, going back to my naval roots, I loved. They did 6th Fleet, 2nd Fleet, 7th Fleet, but 6th Fleet was my favorite. It was modern day naval combat in the Mediterranean, and I just loved it so much.
I don't have all the Fleet games, but they did do others.
So, for example, here's a printout of errata for the 6th Fleet, and I guarantee you I got that out of a General magazine, and because I can tell that I laid this on a copy machine and printed it out. But it was just, and the thing about Victor games is they always made their solitary suitability was always high in their games, always high. It's just good stuff.
Yeah. So have you noticed, and we'll wrap this up in a second, I promise, but one final thoughts here. Have you noticed any, and again, I understand you haven't paid like that much attention to the cardboard stuff, but you noticed any differences or trends, developments these days from when the heyday of when you were in the thick of things?
I would say, especially looking through your collection, I mean, this is all your collection, but the games that are coming out today, the quality of them, from a production value, especially GMT, just props to them. It's just incredible what it is. And what I do like, so to broaden the scope a little bit, what I do like is board gaming in general has absolutely seen a resurgence, especially over the last decade. I don't know. I'm not familiar with. I don't follow the industry that closely. I mean, so Settlers of Catan. I mean, games like that are being bought by the millions now
Yeah,
at
they
this
are.
point.
Yeah. Not by me, but yeah.
And I can tell, when I look at the P500 and you see the amount of orders that they're getting. So like the Pacific War is just. I mean,
It's getting reprinted, right?
yeah, it's getting reprinted, and it's just incredible how many people are ordering this thing, and I think it's great.
Yeah.
The fact that even with all the technological advances, that board gaming is actually alive and well and coming back.
Yeah, these old school games that you think would just be relegated to the dustbin, they're reprinting Russian Campaign
Absolutely.
and East Front Tank Leader. I think Compass Games is reprinting that now, and it's on and on. I think it's fantastic.
The only thing that worries me about the future of wargaming, not board gaming, is what happens. Is there a generation under us?
That's been talked about. The grain of the hobby was an article in Hexes and Soldiers magazine by Adam Starkweather. And there is concern there, but
I actually have an article. I wrote an article for your.
Well, you did, yeah. What's the phrase of the weekend? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see.
Yep.
But I think we're going to wrap it up, and
You finished your Guinness.
I'm glad you were able to hang out with us, and I would also add that a lot of my musical influences from this guy as well. I remember my first concert was Rush. and that was
Absolutely.
because of
Best
him.
game ever. Our best band ever.
That was because of him. I would add to that Asia, Billy Idol, among other
Oh,
things.
absolutely.
These are groups and people and things that I don't know if I would know them otherwise without this guy. So
Yeah. Heavy Big Brother influence.
exactly. All right, y'all. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you later.
Take care.